1 minute. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you. I was reflecting on yesterday's conversations and the brands that we had in the room and the conversations and the content. And it's just so good to be back live and to be here with all of you. And this is why we're coming back live. So thank you for making this time, spending it with Odyssey. We were just so thrilled to have you. The other thing I was thinking about was the conversations yesterday, and there were some themes that went through the conversations, and one of them was connection. And we were all talking about whatever brand we represented, whatever platform we were from, it was about making those connections with consumers. Community was another theme that we talked about, and building community and creating those connections at scale, and using authentic creative to do that. Now, I'm biased, and because I work at Odyssey, maybe it's because you're all here at Odyssey, but I think audio is the ultimate medium to deliver on that. And I'm going to give you 4 reasons why, and then I'm going to prove it. And I'm not going to prove it. I'm going to let somebody else prove it. But the 4 reasons are, first, audio is the ultimate companion medium. It can be with you. You can actively engage in audio when you're actively doing something else, when you're running, when you're cooking, when you're driving, when you're laying with your eyes closed, just finding your breath. And without getting too sciencey on everybody, when you're deeply engaged with audio and really listening to it, your brain releases a chemical composition of serotonin and oxytocin in the same composition that gets released when you get a hug from somebody you love. And that's why audio has this effect over us. So that's one reason. It's also ubiquitous, right? It can be with you wherever you want to go. It's in your home through your smart speakers. It's in your car and your radio. It's in your ears on your phone. Wherever you are, it can be with you. We know the third reason, it's reach and scale. Audio reaches 97% of Americans every single day. But now, with so much audio going onto the stream, podcasts, and the ability to give real attribution to over-the-air radio, there is precision now. So the value proposition is reach, scale, and precision. I'm gonna prove it to you. So we have a treat this morning. As I was talking about our stations yesterday, this cluster in Chicago is just so impressive. And I'm biased because I'm a sports fan, but I think the Score is it's just such an amazing station in this cluster. And if you look at the Score, it's one of the best sports stations in the entire country. Dave Haw is co-host of the morning show. Dave, for those who are Chicagoans, he's a local legend. He is the voice of Chicago sports. He's been doing it for a long time. He's going to come up here. We're going to have a conversation to start the day for about 20 minutes. So I don't want to waste any more time with an opening soliloquy. I'd rather bring up Dave and have a great conversation. So please welcome Dave Haw to the stage. Dave.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Good morning.
So
there we go.
I don't know if everyone stayed up late last night, but there were some good games on last night.
I stayed up just as late as I needed to.
Right. The Blues just came back.
Well, we don't talk hockey here. No, the hockey game was awesome.
Yeah.
Because they were down 3 goals. They come back. They win in overtime. Sox ended late. Cubs not as late. But right after we're conditioned now, after the last out, you go to bed.
Got it.
You can't stick around because you have to get up early to come in.
What time do you get up?
I get up every day about 3. Yeah, about 3. We're on the air at 5. And you do a lot of catch up in between 3 and 5, just so you don't want to go on the air unprepared. But yeah, it's just changing from, and we'll talk about this, but going from being a sports writer where you end up being done around 1 or 2 in the morning some nights.
Yeah.
And then getting up at 3. Yeah, it's an adjustment, but it's a good one.
So Dave and I prep, like as you all do for your sessions. I'm going to go off script first question here, because now you've got me. I'm curious. So you get up at 3, like what's the routine to get from out of bed, feet hitting the ground, to in front of the mic to millions of people?
Right. That's a good question. So my commute is about 45 minutes, and it's one where you do a lot of listening to like podcasts on the way to kind of prepare. You have a routine where you eat as little as possible because you don't have a lot of time. You get here, and once I get here, then I catch up on. I'll watch highlights. I'll read post-game reports. I'll do all the research like if I were writing about it, because that's my training kind of as a writer. And then you think about, okay, then you just hit the highlights. So you know what you want to talk about. And what we do is in playing the hits, you're not going to have to worry about, well, who moved the runner from second over from second and in the 7th inning. You need to know more about who said what after the game and why will people be talking about that this morning? Why is it worth your time?
So, and there's just so much emotion with sports, probably more than anything else. Like, are you prepping the conversation for the whole show, or are you just like thinking in your mind, these are the topics I've got?
Well, by now, I'll know, we all know in the morning show kind of what resonates with Chicago sports fans.
Yeah.
You know that it's not going to be what about that great pitching change in the 7th inning? It's going to be something about why did he, what happened to the pitcher who walked off the mound, Joe Kelly for the Sox, holding his hamstring last night in the 8th inning. What does that mean not only to last night, but what does that mean to this season? And what does that mean to the $8 million they paid him to come here to pitch? And, all these big picture implications, everything that has a small effect on that night's game could have a big picture implication. And it's our job to kind of let people know what we think the big picture implications are of all those little moves.
Got it. So I started in the middle. Let's go back to the top, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Ha. So David, tell us your story. Tell us, like, you played football at Ball State, you're a journalist, and now you're the voice of Chicago sports. So
I'm here because I heard you talking earlier. I believe in audio. Okay. I believe in audio, and I believe this was the direction my career needed to go. I had dabbled in it. I'd worked part-time. We did some things, but I was at the Chicago Tribune for 17 years. I was a lead columnist for the last 10 at the Tribune that I spent there. And it was my dream job. I grew up in North Judson, Indiana, small town, Northwest Indiana, 1,200 people, graduating class 99, loved being proud of where I'm from. But I always wanted to work at the Chicago Tribune. I wanted to be the lead columnist at the Tribune, and I was, and I had that job. And then things changed in the newspaper industry. It wasn't as powerful, or you couldn't reach as many people. And I had an opportunity here at the Score, and it just was 4 years ago, and it was great. And I believed in audio, and I wanted to make that move. And I wanted to make that move because it was time to do it for me. And I've always been passionate in combining sports. And I'm a writer. I'm a writer on the radio, but I'm also a writer now who I feel more like an audio guy, right? So going back further, I did play college football at Ball State. I came from a small town. I went to Ball State. I played in the Mid-American Conference, and I was one of those guys that had a pretty good college career. You kind of toy with the idea of my senior year. I had some people, some agents saying, oh, you can get you a tryout here or there. But once I knew I was headed to journalism, it was either going to be grad school or sign with an agent that said they could get me a tryout. And we were on national television, the California Raisin Bowl. And I chased a wide receiver into the end zone for the last 20 yards on ESPN. And I knew at that moment I was destined for journalism.
There you go. That's great. That's an awesome story. So, we were going to play, we only have 20 minutes with you, and I wanted to make sure we got every second of time with you, David. And so we didn't do like the score. We have Mitch and the team put together an awesome promo piece, but what is it about the score? There's sports stations in every market. What makes the score so special?
I think the audience is unique. I think the Chicago sports fan, the prototypical Chicago sports fan, is as passionate as any sports city's fandom that you can imagine. So I think what happened here over time, the 30 years that the Score has been here, those are relationships. It's almost like a family within a family. And so that's the audience. And what happens is you have that unique connection, and you have that unique connection with the audience that makes you makes you crazy sometimes when they're calling you and they're challenging you. It makes you feel good sometimes when they're calling you and supporting you. And it also makes you sometimes feel connected in a way where you're going through difficult times. I can think of one example, here in Chicago, I had a unique relationship with Les Grobstein, who was a legend. Les passed away, and it was on, I was on the air when Mitch Rosen, brand manager, told us what had happened, and we had to deal with Les, who was a legend, passing away, and telling the audience. And you know what? That day was as memorable of a day as I've had since coming to the Score, because of the way that the audience responded to it, calling in with their stories, helping us through that. And I think that it really struck me in that moment, in those 4 hours of that show, and that week, just the value and the power of an audience in helping process these human emotions. And this, you don't think of things that way when you don't work here or if you don't part of it, but the audience engagement, I think, really was unique in that time. And I think it makes the Score something special.
You hit on something that you reminded me of something. Another attribute of audio is like, it is there in the moments that matter most. Just like that, whether they're great moments or they're hard moments, audio is right there and it's the go-to. So our audience, we have brands out here, we have platforms out here, and by the way, there's hundreds more on a stream right now listening to us and watching us. What do you think makes great content? You're in the content business, right? You're a storyteller. What makes great content? I'm a
storyteller, and I always look at it. My training is as a writer, as a columnist, as a journalist. So what makes great content? We come in every morning, and I think, I can complain or sound like, boy, getting up at 3 a.m. is drudgery. I love it. I love it because we get the first shot. And so we come in here and we're on the air at 5. And the way that I view it, content wise, is that we are the virtual front page for Chicago sports. And when you think of it that way, okay, what is the front page of your sports section? The way, the traditional sort of way that I grew up thinking about news and news judgment. What's the screaming headline? What are the other 4 stories? There's typically going to be 4 or 5 things each day that you feel like you have to, content-wise, address thoroughly, fairly, and in a way that serves the public's interest. So you think of it that way. Content-wise, you wake up every morning, you go through what happened, what was said, what else is going on around Chicago, because that matters too. You don't want to have your head in the sand and be so insular that or provincial that you ignore what Steve Kerr said, pounding the fist about the tragedy, or what somebody else said, what happened in the playoff game with the, in overtime. You've got to be conscious of all those things, but content-wise, you figure out what is your screaming headline, what's your 60-point headline, what's the secondary story, what are the other stories that help fill it out, and you hope to have a variety without missing the main point. And I think that's the value, and that's the challenge, and that's the fun of it, is that you come in every day and you sort of establish a pecking order or a hierarchy of the news stories. And really what happens is that by design or just by a habit, people throughout the day sort of follow your lead. I loved that when I was writing columns, and I like it even more now that, you're providing, the outline maybe for the sports conversation. You're steering the discussion as you get there every morning, beginning at 5 o'clock.
I got to go back to the first question. So you finish the show, you're spending some time with us. Now, what's the rest of your day look like?
Well, it always depends, but I think what you want to do is you kind of decompress a little bit. When I work out, what I do is I listen to the Odyssey app. I work out or I'll run, and
Odyssey.
And it's great when you can go through it. I'll maybe listen to some things I might have missed. I also just keep track of things, and you want to kind of, I like to continue to write. I would like to write a little bit more for our website, because I do think that there's some value in that. And you just kind of keep up on whatever games. Today, the Cubs have a day game. The Sox play tonight, and you kind of space it out. You can't watch every pitch of every game. You can't watch every possession of every basketball game. I'm a hockey guy. I like hockey. My son plays hockey, and I love football. So I think you just balance it all, and you try to make sure you don't miss anything.
That's great. When you think about brands, because we're an ad-supported platform, what would you advise brands to do as they want to come into audio and bring their brands in really meaningful ways, not just 30-second spots, but whether it's have you talk about them or have them integrated into the content? What would you say to a brand?
That's a good question. And it's something that I've really been curious about because, having a career in newspapers, you don't deal with that a lot. Then you come in here and it's a big part of it because of the way that you have the access to these kind of opportunities. Best example I can give you is like Flag and Anthem, for example, the brand that comes in and they've used us, Molly and I, in the morning, and they have clothed us. So we're talking about these shirts that we're wearing or these pants that we're wearing and all these things. And it becomes sort of a camaraderie with the listener, a camaraderie with each other. And then there's a presence, there's a passion, there's an involvement that, we are actually wearing the clothes. So I think it's about relationships. And I think we were able to develop a relationship. We have a relationship with some of the other brands that we endorse. And I think what it goes back to is the same thing that anything. If you tell a story as a writer, if you tell a story as somebody on the air, you want to basically develop a rapport and a relationship. And I think when you're dealing with these brands and the people who are representing those brands, you want to begin with that relationship, that rapport. And once you have that, then everything else comes more naturally. And that's what you're looking for. You want things to be more natural and less scripted and more authentic and less kind of forced. And I think that's what you're looking for.
That word authenticity, that was a theme through yesterday. There's a responsibility that sits on you and Molly's shoulders. You're a daily habit for millions of people, and the trust that they have in you, the love, and they get angry at you too. But,
sure,
but you are.
You hope so.
Yeah, you want it. I mean, that's there's nothing like sports radio. But the authenticity. I think you have to believe in the brands that you are endorsing, or else it's just not going to land.
You have to, and I think that's the benefit of having things that you can put your hands on, or people who you can look in the eye to and get what they're meaning, get what they're wanting, and being able to try to deliver the best you can.
Yeah. So I totally agree. So, sports, the other thing about sports is just the emotional roller coaster that can happen. At any play, there is diverging opinions on or diverging emotions. So for you, just what's been the biggest emotional moment you have been involved in sports?
Well, in sports in general, I think, okay, so I was the columnist for the Chicago Tribune in Game 7 of the World Series in 2016 when the Cubs beat the Indians. All right. So in that moment, I grew up a diehard Cubs fan. But I think when you're a journalist, you kind of suppress that a little bit because you're paid to be objective. Because if I would have been the 12-year-old me in that press box during the 22-minute rain delay, when you have 20 minutes to write 600 words on something somebody's going to pull out of a time capsule in 25 years, you'll be paralyzed with fear, right? So it's different there than that was probably the biggest moment. That was actually the moment as a columnist. I felt like walked out of the press box that night. It's not going to get any better than this. It's not going to get any better than what I just did, what I just wrote, what I just watched and witnessed and was part of. So that was, from a professional standpoint, maybe the highlight. From a personal standpoint, I think that after that, you think like, all right, then you pivot here and you think emotions. It's a different emotion when you're on the air, because I think that you don't have to be as controlled, as measured sometimes. And I think that's part of the challenge for me, is to find that balance, because you're right. People will want to hate you. They'll call you up and they'll say, I cannot stand listening to you. I do it every day.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks.
That's a fan.
Exactly.
That's the guy you want.
But you want to, so you want to have that balance. And it's more of an emotional investment. I can let myself be more of a sports fan now than I could be maybe when I was paid to be an objective journalist.
Another sidebar question. I was just thinking about it. When you started as a journalist, like, you're a craftsperson, you're a writer. How has social media changed that? Does it frustrate you? Like, the purity of writing, how it's changed?
Well, it has changed a lot. I mean, certainly, yeah, I'm evaluated now more by 288 characters than I used to be in 1,500 words. I think what you want to do, whether it's in social media, and I tell this if I talk to classes and I'll talk to anyone, when you're on social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the platform, every time that you tweet and you hit send, or every time you just hit send, you are publishing something under your name, or you're publishing something, or you're broadcasting something for your company. You are amplifying your message, but you represent your company. Don't do it if you're not comfortable with it. Don't do it if it's unprofessional. Don't be somebody that you don't want to be. If I cannot be personal. I don't have that privilege. I don't have that right to be somebody that I'm not on the air and social media. So you want to be consistent every time you go to a platform like that, because that's why I look at it. Yeah, there are negatives, and there are a lot of, I always say that Twitter is where context goes to die, because there's no context in social media, but the positives outweigh the negatives, and the reach that it extends for you individually, for me on the air, for us as a show and as a station, tremendous. So I think when you think of it that way and you look at it that way, I think that you want to accentuate the positives over the possible drawbacks or negatives that it could provide.
It's, I know we're getting to time here, but what's really interesting is you were just sort of talking about yourself, not just as a representative of Odyssey or the Score or the show, but like Brand David and managing Brand David. And I think there's a takeaway from, audiences here.
That's very important.
Brand management.
I think you have to worry about yourself and your reputation. There are a lot of things you can't control in this industry. Everybody knows that, but you can control your effort, your attitude, and to some degree, your reputation about what you want people to, how do they want to view you. So if it's as, the fly off the handle guy or the impulsive guy or whatever, that's fine. Some people are screamers. Some people are whatever it is, you want to be what's true to your own personality, and that becomes your brand, hopefully, or what's true within your, whatever your approach is professionally. And so my approach maybe has changed subtly since I went from print or digital to audio, but I don't think it's changed a great deal. And I think that consistency ends up becoming hopefully part of your brand and part of the message and part of what you're selling, both individually and collectively as a show and as a station.
Awesome. All right, we've got to go. Last question.
All right.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Oh boy. It is May 26th, and you're asking me of a Super Bowl question before training camp. Buffalo Bills.
There you go. And the national title, and the answer is USC, but go ahead.
No, the answer is SEC. Somebody in the SEC, that's a pretty safe bet. I'll go with Alabama.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Haw, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Keep it going here. I'm sorry, we're behind schedule, and it's my fault. We are going to bring up, ready? Ferrara. Everybody loves sweets. We're going with sweets. Ferrara. Catherine Berger, who is the Senior Director of Growth Projects, and Amanda Knefrick. So interesting conversation, 100-year-old brand, and they're going to talk about how they are bringing those equities earned from over 100 years into the modern consumer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks. So we'll just do some quick introductions here. My name is Amanda Knefrick. I lead the Midwest Brand Partnerships for LG Ad Solutions. We work with both brands and agencies to help them drive incremental reach across their CTV and cross-channel investment. And then I'm here with Catherine Berger. She is the Senior Director of Growth Strategy at Ferrara. So excited to talk to you about candy and growth today.
Two topics that usually get people somewhat excited, or at least a smile.
Yes. So we thought we would start this out with just a fun fact from Catherine about Ferrara. So do you want to just tell the audience a fun fact about the Ferrari brands?
I'm glad you asked me ahead of time because
Yes.
I fear if I had been put on the spot, I would fall short. So I've got a couple of fun facts. The first is I wager to bet everyone in the audience has had one of our products. And I specifically would bet this because we make 95% of candy corn, candy canes, conversation hearts, and jelly bird eggs. So we're huge in the seasons, but those brands specifically are under our Brock's portfolio. So we make a bunch of your favorites. We kick off the fall season with our candy corn. Another fun fact about Ferrara, more specific to our industry, is 4 years ago, we had no social media channels. We had no media spend. We had these legacy brands and we were acquiring more legacy brands and growing a ton. But the growth that we've seen from a marketing communications perspective has been just in the last couple of years. So we've done a lot of work and I'm excited to talk to you about it today. And we've got a lot of work to do. So
awesome. Okay, let's dive in. So Catherine, we're going to talk a little bit about your background. It spans across mobile, data, media, brand transformation, growth. Just tell us a little bit about your current path into your current role and, what inspired you to join the team at Ferrari?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I have a traditional media background. I grew up in agencies. I started my career at PhD in New York. I remember it was my first time in a real office building as an intern. And they had just won the GlaxoSmithKline business. So my desk was in a hallway, like a literal at the end of a hallway. So my team could never find me when they needed me. But from there, I tended towards innovation roles. So I had the privilege of working in an innovation capacity at Horizon Media. And from there, it sort of defined my next couple of jumps. I spent 5 or 6 years in consulting, and I had the privilege to really understand the capacity of media with the broader marketing umbrella and work on some really cool projects with some really cool brands. And that kind of, ignited a passion. And I chose the role at Ferrari because I would have this feeling when projects ended as a consultant. And it would be both a feeling of tremendous relief, like, okay, it's done, I did it. And this feeling of sadness of not getting to see it through. Yeah. And so I had finished a really big project and I was just so bummed that I wasn't getting to work on it anymore. It was actually for a competitor of Ferrari's. And I got to thinking, okay, I think maybe it's time for me to actually roll up my sleeves and join a brand. And so Ferrari was perfect because we are in this hungry growth phase.
Right.
So that's how I ended up at Ferrari.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then, following to that, what are some of the key growth projects that you guys are that you're spearheading with your team right now? And what's exciting to you about them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my role is really to think about our long-term vision.
Okay.
And that's pretty exciting for me because we spend a lot of time in media planning on a calendar basis, and it's a lot of planning, but it's not a ton of really long-term planning. So long-term right now is defined as about 5 years, which may not be long-term for some CPGs, but for brands that 4 years ago didn't have media spend, that's a long-term for us. So I am thinking about all the things that we need to do to set our long-term growth ambition and achieve it.
Awesome. So this was already mentioned, but the Ferrari brand is over 100 years old. And so, how are you guys honoring the legacy of the brands while focusing on innovating for the future?
Yeah, it's really everything that we're doing right now is thinking about these tremendous equities that we have. And if some of you are from the Chicagoland area, you probably know Lemonheads. They were longtime sponsors of the Chicago Blackhawks. People tell me about driving by, I think our Forest Park factory where the Red Hots would be made. And on the days the Red Hots were being panned, it would just smell of cinnamon. But we also have brands like Nerds. I brought some for, this is actually a very special package of Nerds. I'll tell you why. But we have brands like Nerds who most of us grew up with and treasure and love and can remember like shaking the pack. And we are bringing them to life through really, this is a category shaking innovation that we have. So we're innovating through our products, but we're also innovating in the way that we think about reaching consumers. So we are both trying to hold on to those equities that we have and build on them.
Awesome. And then, outside of the Nerds innovation that you guys are doing, what other types of innovation are you doing across the brands this year and coming up?
So I brought these special for you, Amanda, because they were just made yesterday.
Oh, thank you.
And so these are not only
Excited
are these our most premier innovation, and we're innovating across all of our brands from a product perspective, but we're also innovating in the way that we think about our consumers' lives and the way that we show up in them.
Nice.
So it's not a nerds example, but
And when did the nerds come out again?
This
product.
these specifically are gummy clusters. So our gummy clusters came out about 2 years ago, the original flavor, and they are this is urban legend, so don't quote me on it, but the legend is that in one of our factories, we have this big machine that tosses our trolley gummy worms in sugar to sand them. And the legend is that one day, some engineer at the factory was like, what if we put nerds in it and like wrapped a gummy in nerds? And the gummy cluster was born. Maybe
That's
it was more
amazing.
scientific than that, but it's
Yeah.
a really fun story, even if it's not 100% true. These have really broken through the category. The Nerds brand is growing 150%.
Awesome.
These are, if you haven't had them, they're incredible. I wish I had brought more, but I brought them special for you because this is our new flavor. It just won.
And they were made yesterday. So
they were literally
fresh.
made yesterday. I tried to get more and they were like, no, we don't have enough capacity to just hand these out like candy, pun intended. So, and then they just won best non-chocolate innovation at Sweets and Snack Show. That's
awesome.
Yeah, a few blocks away.
Congrats.
So we're innovating
exciting.
product wise. We're also innovating in the way that we show up in content. So
Yeah.
making these brands really relevant.
Wonderful.
For me, something that's really cool is this trend of throwback shows and throwback content. And we have brands that were relevant in the 80s and are relevant now. So we've had a couple of content integrations.
Very cool.
Yeah. So just finding ways to really like pull that nostalgia through.
Very cool. So moving, more into the CPG space, obviously past couple years, CPG brands, they've faced a variety of challenges. What are the biggest challenges that, Ferrari is facing in the past couple years, and how's your team overcoming them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We face the same challenges, I think, that most CPG brands are facing right now. Supply is a challenge. Supply chain is a challenge. Hiring is a huge challenge for us. I mean, all of those things I think we're familiar with. We also have a pretty unique challenge in that we're a group of challenger brands, and that presents unique opportunity. We are in true growth mode. We're stretching. We need capabilities. We need talent every day. So I think that definitely exacerbates some of those challenges, but it's also what makes us a really fun place to work. So
that's
great.
Yeah. You're getting into your media and your marketing strategies. So what does that look like for you guys right now in 2022? We heard a lot about like how brands planned, went to the upfronts this year and how some changes are happening. What kind of emerging media channels are you guys focusing on?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what is so fun for me and what's so unique about us specifically is we're young on our journey. We're very nascent, which gives us this incredible gift of not being mired in what was. And I would say that really makes us different from a lot of CPGs. We don't have this 60 or 40 or 80-year history of, well, we've always done this and it's always worked. We don't have to fight against that. And so we pretty quickly determined, and as of 2021, shifted all of our brands to an all digital strategy. So we planned for that. We were almost there in 2020. And of course, that was a very odd year. So as we think about innovative channels, we're really trying everything. We found tremendous success with audio. There's a ton, I heard the presentation earlier, but there's a ton of just through lines with the way that candy makes consumers feel and the way that candy brings joy and the way that that audio really ignites some of those same kind of pleasure sensors in the brain. We also are huge into gaming. We're really in the early stages of exploring how all of our brands play across gaming. Some of our brands like Trolley has done a tremendous job of really connecting with consumers through gaming, and CTV, digital video content. We are almost 100% video actually. I mean, video, audio, and gaming, but we're really all about bringing our brands to life in a digital fashion. So yeah,
that's wonderful. And
don't ask me about Metaverse.
Definitely.
I know we're exploring, but I don't know.
The Metaverse was talked about quite a bit yesterday. So, and then in terms of, you mentioned this, but your products are making people happy. They're nostalgic. It's a really emotional kind of purchase. How are you using both media and creative to help tell the story of your brands?
It's a good question. So I'd love to say that we've unlocked this. And
Yeah.
I think that in some ways we really have. I'll give a good example, and I can pull from a few. We do really, really strong work. But I think we're still on a journey to kind of bring it to life. The example that comes to mind, well, a couple, but I mentioned our trolley brand in the gaming space. And I'm not a gamer, so please forgive me if I
Me neither.
there was the which I think shows our age,
Yeah.
because like 75% of Gen Z games as their
Yes.
number one entertainment activity. So there's a game that is the hottest game right now, Elden Ring. And Trolley, we do a ton in gaming. It's naturally has a lot of natural affinities to gaming, a gaming audience, gaming profile. And my team and my colleague, Brian and his team, they created we have our Trolley Peachy rings. Well, they transformed the Peachy O's into Elden rings and
Very
launched
cool.
that for a limited time offer, with media accompanying it and sending it to gaming partners. And the reaction was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible. So I think when we do get it right, we get it really right, and we really tap into that passion. And so we're working on just trying to figure out how do we more consistently do that, both spontaneously and planned.
Yeah. And that's a really great way to like make a connection with that audience.
100%.
And
Yeah.
with that product.
100%.
In terms of how you guys are evolving in this space too, is obviously ever changing. Tell us a little bit about your test and learn approaches. Obviously, I know you guys are kind of new, you're on your journey, but would love to hear more about how you guys are testing and learning, and if there's anything that's tried and true for you guys right now that's working really well.
Yeah. Tried and true is funny because when you have, a couple of years to go off of, but it actually makes it so that we can be pretty formulaic. We are a CPG, 85% of purchases are still made at retail. So we still do have challenges in terms of measurement. We certainly can do all of the multi-touch attributions and what have you, but we've gotten really good, I would say. And I'm pretty proud of that. We've gotten really good at understanding what the KPI is, very simply, how we're measuring that KPI, and then putting it all together. And we have tremendous partners in Mindshare and really helping us think through that. And again, when you get to start from scratch and you get to say, okay, what does success look like? We're challenger brands. We tend to spend quite a bit less than our next competitor. We know we have to do things differently in order to win. And we accept that challenge. And when we do it and it works, it's really effective. We're growing, all of our brands are growing more than the category, in some cases 2 or 3x more than the category. So we've seen it be effective.
Fabulous.
And I would say there's a little bit of art in that science too, with consumer centricity. And we hire people that really understand consumers, and we hire people that are our consumers, and we tap into that, and then measure those very simple KPIs. Are we looking for awareness? Are we looking for consideration? Are we looking for conversion? Are we looking for repeat purchase?
Yeah, having the goal in mind up front.
Or are we looking for proxy of one of those? And it's okay if it is a we have the flexibility of, we're just going to make this thing because it's cool and we think it'll hit. And there's not a lot of risk if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Was that the case with the nerds with Gummy Clusters?
With the nerds. I would like to do my fabulous innovation team the honor of saying, I think that there was a lot of tremendous work that went into these. I think it was a little bit more than the story I alluded to, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot more appetite, no pun intended, for risk when, you don't have $1 billion brand on the line.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of your audiences, so obviously you have a portfolio of brands. Tell us a little bit about the audiences that you're going after. I know you mentioned gaming. What are your key messaging tactics? And then, times of year, obviously, I'm sure pretty important for a number of your brands. So
Yeah,
what
definitely.
kind of key seasons?
I think we're still, and we've done a really nice job of understanding who the consumer is and what the consumption moment is. And that
Mhm.
means that in a lot of ways, anyone with a mouth is our consumer. And we try not to be too specific about, really getting granular. But there are exceptions to that rule. Absolutely. Generally, our consumer is under 45 or has children in the house that are consuming. We have a lot of confection brands that are actually purchased and consumed by an older audience,
Mhm.
older meaning not children, so 13 plus. And seasons are huge for us, of course,
Mhm.
but we tend to be always on with our brands. We tend to think that moments of consumption are happening all the time, and we're in an impulse category, so it's critical that we're there when those moments are happening. It's very interesting when you talk to consumers. There's a huge gap in the intent to purchase versus where we know it is. So we have to fill that intent gap with media, frankly, and make sure that we're there when the craving strikes.
Absolutely. Moving into content. So obviously this was a topic that was talked a lot about yesterday, just the fragmentation that's happening in the space right now. You have apps, you have streaming services. How are you guys helping ensure that you are reaching those right audiences in all of the right places?
Yeah. I think this is one we haven't cracked.
Yeah.
I think it's something we're working on for sure. The fragmentation continues to proliferate. There's
Yeah.
no question. We look at where our consumer is, and I think that's our guiding light. Where's the consumer, and how can we show up authentically there? And that we try to put that value before what's the channel, who's the partner, who's the content creator, et cetera. But it's tough. I think an example of when we did this really well is for our Sweet Tarts brand. So Sweet Tarts, as I remembered it, are those Sweet and Tart tablets.
Yeah.
The innovation
Love
on
'em.
Sweet, I mean, they're great. I love Sweet Tarts. The innovation on Sweet Tarts is incredible. Ropes and mini chewies and
Mhm.
gummy splits. And it's just, they've truly brought that brand to life across a bunch of forms.
Awesome.
And the brand equity is really, you can have both. You can have everything at the same
Yeah.
time. And it's,
And then consumers can try all of the different versions of the
exactly.
Sweet Tarts.
And so that has lended itself very much not intentionally, but that has lended itself to really a very pure alignment with the LGBTQ plus community.
Wonderful.
And I think that we were a little cautious because we didn't want to wade into that space without having something to really say. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done, especially, being LGBTQ plus myself.
Mhm.
I'm really proud of that work. And we were able to do an integration with RuPaul's Drag Race, the latest season. And it just came together very organically. It made a ton of sense for the brand.
Mhm.
We were part of the reading challenge, which, like, if you watch the show, it came together so organically. And it didn't really come from like, okay, we're going to do a linear TV buy, and okay, we're going to do this, and okay, we're going to do that. It was really about what's exciting
Yeah.
for our community. How does this align with the ways that we're showing up and giving back to this community?
Mhm.
How does it align with the brand equity? And then the rest kind of followed. And so I appreciated the process there. And then I think the outcome came from that too.
Yeah, that's a really cool story and a great way to kind of interact and blend the brand with your audience. Shifting gears to measurement and success. How are you guys measuring that success right now across both your marketing, your media strategies? What does that look like? You talked a little bit about how the brand Nerds Gummy Clusters has grown, but
Yeah.
what other measures do you guys have in place?
Yeah, I mean, ultimate measure of success for us is growth and market share.
Yeah.
And we certainly look at a ton of proxies as well. I think in the instance for instance of RuPaul's Drag Race, it was like, we kind of used some maybe non-traditional metrics to understand what are people saying, understanding social media chatter, understanding how people were engaging with our product as a result of
Mhm.
that. We track, like most brands, brand health tracking and understanding what
Right.
metrics we're trying to achieve within that are very important to us. And we've built a pretty formulaic approach to growth. And we know, again, that there's a little bit of art to it. And it's a
Mhm.
little bit of just like hitting the right nerve with the consumer, understanding how we fill a consumer need with content as well as with a physical product.
Awesome. And then, future, kind of looking at the future, looking ahead, 5 years from now, and I know you mentioned you guys are just kind of starting your journey. How do you think both your role will change as well as just, the growth strategy for Ferrara in general?
Yeah, great question. 5 years is kind of my timeline horizon for success in this role. And I think if I'm successful and if we're successful, and I feel strongly that we will be, I think in 5 years from now, we won't be thinking about the market as a challenger, as a suite of challenger brands.
Mhm.
We'll be thinking about the market as market leader. And what does the
Yeah.
market leader do? How does the market leader behave? How does the market leader buy media? And that is super exciting because first we need to get there, but I think we'll do it.
Awesome. Well, I think we have a few minutes for any questions from the audience.
Thanks again for having me, and thanks for running this conversation.
And thank you for this. This is great. I'm a huge Nerds fan too. So
Oh,
words
good.
with friends
I
and
actually
nerds.
feel-
Good thing
everybody
he's a
in this room right
coworker,
now.
so I can
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, Amanda did not plant this
I
question.
feel terrible. I
promise.
didn't bring more.
I'll just steal some of those. It's fine.
Okay.
You're talking about a 5-year horizon, right? How much of that is growing your brand, and then also how much of that is growing the actual category, right?
That's such a good question. Yeah, I mean, we both, right? We can't be market leaders just stealing share from competitors. We have to grow the category. And so a lot of it is, what does that look like? What is the future of sweet snacking? And I think we have a little bit of a different perspective than some of our competitors do in the sense that, there's huge emphasis on better for you. And I think that will remain a massive trend in our category. But sweet treating brings an element of delight that, I've never shown up to a meeting with candy and had someone not have a little glitter in their eye. And there's something pretty special about that. It's not for every day, it's special. And so I think when you think about how does that evolve over time, how do we bring things like this to market that if you haven't had these, I don't mean to, push product, but they're truly a different experience. People who don't really eat candy are like, oh, wow, these are great. And they bring a little joy. And we're not trying to be too much bigger than that, but we do think there's room to grow the category. Absolutely.
Thank you. Quick question, and it might be early and unfair, but with Keebler,
Yeah.
how, another mature brand, long time, probably a
Yeah.
little bit of a different media mix. How is that integration going, and how are you guys kind of cross-learning?
That's a great question. So for those of you who aren't aware, Ferrara, it's confusing. Two very old, very legacy, legendary Italian-owned brands. Ferrara is who I represent. We're candy and sugar confection only. Ferrero, is like a cousin company of ours, and we are currently repatriating our biscuits, our cookies portfolio into that. It's early. I think that, if any of the brands are an example of legacy, just incredibly beloved American heartland brands, it's Keebler. And Keebler probably has the biggest challenge ahead of it because of behemoths like, one starts with an O, I won't, but there's just been so much tremendous work done in the categories. I think there's a lot of work to go. But I think if anyone can do it, it's the Ferrero team. That's truly, they are just global juggernauts who really understand brand building. So I'm really excited to see how that turns out. But yes, you're right. A little bit different media mix, a little bit of a different challenge ahead of them. So yeah.
Probably have time for one more. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, I've done that.
Okay.
Oh,
We
wait,
covered it.
I have another fun
Yeah.
fact.
Okay. Another fun fact.
Another fun fact. Our Chuckles brand is one of the first brands that the Ferrari family invented when the company started in 1908. It is older than all forms of media that we buy today, including talking movies. So silent
wow.
movies had come out, but
Yeah.
not talking movies. So
Think about that. How did they get the word out about that back then? They
it's just incredible how brands grew in a different time. I mean,
Absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, of
This
course.
was
Thank you all.
great.
Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
You didn't bring candy for everyone.
I feel terrible. I'm gonna have to come around with a backpack.
That was awesome. Thank you. Okay, so all right, and we get some more people out here. So we're going to turn a little bit now, and we're going to go into the hospitality realm. Imperium Hotel Group, a really, really interesting boutique hotel group with properties in secondary and tertiary cities around the country. Jason Pirak, part of their marketing team, Ashley Schroeder, Pad Squad, come on up, and we look forward. They're going to be talking about talent, teams, and making them work together. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Oh. Well, thank you very much to Brand Innovators for having us and for Jason joining me today.
Thank you.
I know we're going to spend a lot of our next 30 minutes talking about talent and how you built your team up. So I think it's only fair to start at the beginning and talk a little bit about how you started your career. So what was your very first job, and not marketing job, your very first job in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi, everybody. First of all, thanks for attending too. Good to see everybody in the crowd. My first job was actually at, there was a grocery store in my hometown called Sparkle, and I was a bag boy and stock clerk. So yes.
Very nice. And were there any big learnings that you had from that role that you still use today?
You know, it's funny, you don't necessarily think about it, but as you sort of look back and reflect on your career, I would say like structure was probably one, just because, you know, going from not having a job and then you finally have to like be somewhere and be on time. So that accountability, teamwork, collaboration, those are all things that I kind of think of.
Yeah, and stuff I'm sure that you have disseminated to your team now. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's take jump back to current day and talk a little bit about Imperium Hotels. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what you do for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you guys heard a little bit earlier on in the intro, but Imperium Hotel Group, we own and operate boutique hotels, restaurants, and actually a membership club in 10 locations across the country. So we're predominantly in secondary and tertiary cities. So we're as far south as Tampa, we're as far west as Fargo, as far east as Montclair, New Jersey, which is actually outside of Manhattan, and then as far north as Minneapolis. So we pride ourselves on, you know, a very local experience. And I oversee all marketing for the Imperium brand as well as the properties.
Amazing. And what did the journey look like to really get you into that role? What was kind of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started off in retail. And I started with Target corporate out of college up in Minneapolis. And I had done, as I was kind of going through my journey in retail, I was at Target, I was at Sears, I was with General Growth Properties. I kind of stopped and did a little bit of like self-reflection and thought about like, what do I really love? What am I passionate about? And I love to travel. I love hospitality. I love experiences. And so that really got me into that space. And I was fortunate enough to start off with Hyatt as my first foray into the hospitality space. And that was such an awesome jumping off point because Hyatt really does such a great job in the hospitality space, and they're very well known. But I realized quickly that I wanted to get out of the corporate environment or the bigger brand environment and go somewhere where I could really make like a bigger impact. And so that's where Imperium came along. And I started off as a director there, and quickly found out that marketing was misunderstood, which I'm sure that many of you have run into in your careers, that everyone has their own definition and expectation of what marketing is. So I spent a lot of that initial time at the company just like educating, communicating, really diving into what we were currently doing, where our opportunities were, and really trying to show the power of what marketing can do, right? And that ultimately led to building out a true marketing department, moving into the VP role or head of marketing role, and just building out the team and continuing to build out the department.
Absolutely. And I think that that is definitely a misunderstanding that happens at many companies. So
Yeah.
what was some of the ways that you had to educate the company, and how did you go about that to really get them to understand marketing and the needs that you had for building out a team?
Yeah, a lot of it was kind of, first interviewing them, right? And understanding what is your interpretation, right? What overall are you, how do you look at marketing? How do you feel like we're leveraging it today? And then really diving into, sort of low hanging fruit, big impact items that we weren't doing. So in our space, paid meta is big, and that was something that, we weren't involved in. So it was bringing in tools like that, or bringing in platforms like that. And then just a lot of visuals, a lot of, repetition of, the principles of marketing and the basics and 101s, and just kind of going on that roadshow kind of constantly. That's always, I tell my team all the time, every day, a big chunk of your job is education and communication.
That makes sense. And I think you have a really interesting story of how you went about building your team and finding the right thing. I think a huge topic for everybody right now is talent, finding the right talent, making sure that you have the right people in place to help with what is a huge role and help really do marketing for all of your different properties. So can you tell us a little bit about how you went about building that team and finding that talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that, I'll say in terms of like what I look for in building a team is I'm first looking at balance. I want to make sure that the people that are coming onto the team work well or gel well with the rest of the existing group, and not only just balance in that, but balance in skill set, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have multiple people that all have strengths in the same areas, where is that going to get you? You want to make sure that there are folks that are, offsetting some of that balance and that are smarter than me in certain areas, right? Or more potent or powerful in those areas. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for energy, enthusiasm, attitude, and initiative. Like those are the big ones to me. I feel like we can, people are teachable, right? If you can get them excited, if you can get them engaged, and maybe they're lacking a little bit in some of the skills, you can always bring that to the table. So those are things that I initially kind of looked for. But in terms of like building the actual team itself was sort of focused on business priorities. Like ultimately it was, digital is such a big space for marketers in general, right? All companies, digital is huge. So it was bringing on, a head of digital, and then slowly looking at like, what are the largest channels that were that are impactful for our company. And so slowly bringing on somebody for integrated marketing, PR and communications, lifecycle marketing, evaluating, agencies, making sure they're as potent as possible, and really being an extension of the team. So those are all ways that, I really looked at building it out.
Yeah. And I think that you had mentioned you went from a team of 1 to a team of 5 now, right?
Yeah.
And that all happened during the pandemic.
Yes, it did.
That's impressive that you're able to build out a team that large during that. What were some of the challenges that you faced while building that team out during the pandemic, especially in an industry that was hit so hard?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, financials, that was a big one. So that was a sell. I would think hiring, as we're all challenged with right now. I can't think of anybody that's not having an opportunity in the hiring department. But I would say those were the 2 biggest ones. But again, it was sort of selling that vision of what marketing can do and how powerful it can be, And I think that was something that we were missing. We weren't able to support our existing infrastructure and our existing business. And so by really thinking about it as like, how will this ultimately benefit the company long term, to provide that ample support that we needed, was really how leadership bought into it.
That's amazing. Very
Yeah.
impressive. What are some of the tips and tricks that you learned along the way, your best practices as you were hiring? Is there anything that you could kind of share with the group in terms of what worked, what didn't work when you were looking to hire this talent?
Yeah. I have, my top three, I would say, the first one is shake the unicorn mindset. And what I mean by that is, I think you've got to, when you walk into hiring a candidate, you've got to understand what your priorities are, right? And you have to understand, what are you willing to concede on? And what are you not willing to, right? What are those teachable moments? So I think that would probably be the number one thing that I would think of as far as tips go. I think another one is being flexible with the role itself. There was a role in particular that I hired for, and the title and job description changed 5 times throughout the process. And I ultimately was looking at it as like, I have this person that I think would be an awesome fit for the team. How can I make it work for them? And that's actually turned out to be like an awesome success, because he's like thriving and doing super well. So I think that would be, and then I think the other piece is like just working with candidates. At the end of the day, it's just as much about them as it is about you. And so work together, collaborate together. What's going to be the best for both parties interested? Don't just make it about you, the employer.
I think that is very smart, especially in the fact that it's a job seekers market right now. I think shaking that mindset and really working with the candidates is a great way to go about it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
What is your favorite interview question or your go-to interview question?
I have a few different ones, but the one that I've been using the most lately is, what is your interpretation of the role? And I think that sort of speaks volumes, because it makes me understand like how well prepared they are, how much they've thought about the actual role and digested what it is. And then I can then fill in the blanks of wherever they sort of missed the opportunity or missed the interpretation.
Okay, that
Yeah.
completely makes sense.
Yeah.
So shifting a little bit to creativity, and I know that's at the core of Imperium's ethos and what they really stand for. Hotels done differently is your guys' tagline. So how are you guys doing it differently? What is your approach to set yourself apart from your competition?
Yeah, a few things that we look at. So, hotels done differently to us really means like challenging the status quo. Really thinking about things in a way that's going to truly prove intuitive service. So I think a lot of times when you walk into a hotel, it might be a little bit more scripted, a little bit more buttoned up, but we're really trying to tailor our approach to that individual guest. And then we're also really leaning on, one of our core values is around translocal hospitality. And what that means for us is it's the intersection of a transient guest and a local, and where they kind of come together, right? Because we want to make sure that regardless of who you are, that you're having that local experience and you're having kind of a well-rounded experience. And so we're truly bringing in the community in all aspects. Lifestyle is a big like buzzword that gets thrown around today, right? But we actually have directors of lifestyle at every property, and their sole focus is about bringing the community in, bringing collaborators, bringing in activations, programming, things that are for the local community, but also for the guests to be immersed in that destination. And that's really what helps to kind of set us apart and really think about doing things differently.
Yeah, and I've been to the location in Kansas City. It's beautiful. Been to some events there, so definitely understand what you're saying with bringing in the local community. And I think that speaks really well to how you guys think about creativity and doing things differently. So how do you infuse that same creativity within your team and make sure that they are kind of thinking outside of the box?
Yeah, I mean, Creativity, to me, a big part of it is like making sure that you have the right environment for it, that you're sort of creating that space for team members to feel comfortable and feel okay about bringing ideas forward, right? You don't want to have an environment where, no, that's a bad idea. You know, you don't want to stifle that. So I think by having more of like an open dialogue and again, just that comfortable, free sort of space helps to open up a lot of that creativity. And then I think the other big piece is making sure that you're putting those ideas that come forward into action. And it's not just like, yeah, in one ear, out the other. I'm very much, there's been tons of times where I've walked into a meeting and I was almost positive we were going to go one direction and my team swayed me in another. And I think that also proves that, you know, there's less ego, there's more vulnerability, those types of things as well. And so that just is a combination of how you're kind of creating that space overall.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, you have a leaner team to
Mhm.
accomplish a lot within your marketing department. So what's some of the ways that you keep them motivated and you know, really strategically keep them on task?
Yeah, we party a lot. No, I'm just kidding. No,
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in like pausing and celebrating the wins. Like whether it's, I know that's kind of cheesy, you hear that, whether it's small, whether it's big, but like an example of that is we do quarterly planning sessions as a team. And for our Q1 session, we did a champagne toast to, you know, to each other to kind of congratulate on everything that we accomplished in Q1. And I think that was like really impactful for them, that we stopped and said, holy crap, we accomplished so much in this first quarter. And then we kind of went into, you know, what are our priorities for the coming quarter. And I think by number one, celebrating those, but then as a group, really setting those priorities on a quarterly basis, everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what everyone's working on, and there isn't this like, you know, misunderstanding of what each other are working on, or everybody can kind of be an advocate for one another. Like, oh, digital's doing this, that's why they can't prioritize your request or your work or whatever it may be. So that's one way that we do it. And then I actually use a filter. We have 4 like key criteria for taking on things on the team. Again, we're super lean for having over 25 brands across our hotels, restaurants, rooftops, et cetera. And so we use a filter around like, what is the impact? What's the revenue associated? Is this going to help long term? So those are all like, you know, ideas of kind of what we use that filter. And then if something comes on, something goes off, because we can't take everything on, and I don't want to burn out the team. So
Yeah, the filter, when we were talking during our prep meetings, I found that to be so interesting that, you know, you have a very set of criteria that you're making sure that your team is going against. So I think that that is a great way to go about it, especially when working with a leaner team.
yeah.
You know, we talked a lot about your team, but you personally, where do you find your inspiration from? Where do you kind of generate those creative ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I follow so many different people and publications, but I honestly, I think that at the end of the day, it's from my own personal experiences, whether that's like traveling or going to, you know, a new restaurant in the city or something along those lines. I'm very much like a sensory person. So that's where I would say I gain the most. And then usually it like sparks an idea that sparks another idea that sparks another idea. So, yeah.
Amazing. And what are you most excited about for your team from a marketing standpoint as you head into the back half of 2022 and looking forward to 2023? What really excites you? What do you guys have your eye on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So part of my vision for building out the team is like, I want to be the best in class in the hospitality industry. Like I want people to look to Imperium as like, this is how you do marketing. This is the right, you know, they're doing new and innovative things. They're thinking about reporting differently. They're thinking about how they're tackling the industry differently. And so I think we're really building that team to get us there and kind of be that almost internal agency, if you will. So that's one thing that I'm super excited about. And then we're doing a lot of work with our websites right now that is is just a different way to kind of look at things, really focusing so much more on performance and focusing a lot on, load time and visibility, but then also thinking about how we tie all of the brands in together, which is exciting because that's going to help us leap forward to our like B2C refresh rollout. So those are things that I'm really excited about.
Amazing. And I think one of the things that you also mentioned during our chat was the halo effect that your brand advertising has on each one of the brands, and
Mhm.
what the brands are doing for, or what each of the properties are doing for the brand overall. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I was on a call or webinar recently, and we were talking about halo effect. I don't know how much you guys all have dealt with this, or but we look at halo effect as like anytime that you're advertising or you're marketing, just because you're pushing people for a certain message or a certain product, we all know that they're not necessarily doing exactly what you want them to do, but because you have that top of mind awareness, you're pushing people into, say, for us, it might be another rate code, or it might be pushing them to a restaurant reservation. So really starting to measure, how do we, when we run campaigns, how do we look at it differently in terms of the attribution to the actual thing that we're advertising or promoting, but then what does the larger effect of that campaign have on the business, right? Because like I said, it could be for us, it might be, we're trying to push a winter rate code, right? But we're also pushing a ton of people into our best available rate code as well. So just kind of identifying, measuring, testing, learning, and figuring out how do we better get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense for your brand and for each of the properties to kind of understand that better. So thank you for walking us through that.
Yeah.
Well, I like to kind of close out with some more like rapid fire questions and
Yeah.
go over a few more like fun things. So what's your favorite hotel of Imperium that we should all check out? Are you allowed to say?
Can I say that? That's like saying what's your favorite kid. Can I say that? No, Crossroads is I will say it's one of my favorites. Crossroads in Kansas City. It's just, I think that out of our portfolio, they're kind of hitting it on all cylinders, on all of our pillars. The service is incredible. It's just a great product. Wonderful outlets. I mean, they've got Lazia, which is this great Italian restaurant, a rooftop, so killer. Yeah, I know these are rapid fire, so I'll stop.
You can keep going. And what is the most creative hotel experience we need to know about?
Of ours, or
Of yours, or if you have another one you'd like to talk about?
so of ours, I would say during the pandemic, we transformed our suites into private dining suites, which was really cool and got a lot of attention nationally. So basically you could rent out a room seated for 6 people. We had created these content videos that had the chef walking you through how he prepared each portion of the meal, or each segment of the meal. And that was just an incredible, like, we had a wait list for weeks on that in Minneapolis. That was a pretty
It sounds
neat one.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
great
pretty
idea.
cool.
And then one of the things that we found out about you when we were chatting and doing our research on you is that you are a Bloody Mary enthusiast, and we're heading
Yes.
into the long holiday
Which is
weekend.
true.
So I think you're going to have to share some tips and tricks for Bloody Marys. Tell us what your favorite Bloody Mary in Chicago is,
Mhm.
so people can go check it out for the long weekend.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I would say, as far as like tips for a Bloody Mary, booze to mix ratio is very, very important. You do not want to have too much vodka in your mix because it overpowers it. You want to taste the mix, right? Like, that's a very important one. As far as right now, my favorite is actually Little Goat Diner in the West Loop.
Okay.
They have a really solid, I don't know, it's just like a really kind of savory, just a really good balance of their mix. So it's got a little heat to it, but yeah, it's one of my favorites.
What's your favorite topping? Because I know sometimes you can get a whole meal in them now. So
Yeah, depending on where you go. My favorite, I mean, it's important to have a pickle to me. Like, I want to have a pickle. Yeah.
I love it. Amazing. All right. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, so we can open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions for you about Imperium or about Bloody Marys.
Yeah, I'm open to anything. Yeah. Okay.
In the hospitality industry, we know it's very competitive, and how to keep your brand top of mind. What have you guys found in your space has been the best way to get word of mouth out, brand awareness, that you have multiple different lines of business within your group?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on that challenge. I mean, we try to we actually use a lot of influencers, to be honest. Like because we have such fun, like cool, unique properties, we get a lot of requests around influencers, and social media is a big part of our business, as it is for a lot of businesses, but we really lean on them because it's kind of this like ongoing constant stream of getting us out there. And if you think about it, to me, next to the website, social media is the next most visited for planning your trip. And so that's such an important piece to tell that story and stay relevant. So that's what I would say we lean on the most for.
Yeah. So the question that I have is pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, like the entire perception of travel changed with Airbnbs and everything, and it got tremendous amount of like attention everywhere. So as a brand, what is the fundamental shift that you have seen that you think has changed the marketing or your brand efforts, or what's the one major shift that you have seen in terms of how you are approaching you're spreading the word about your brand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of feel like messaging is probably the biggest thing. I think that more so than ever is making sure that people are extremely informed about what we have to offer. During the pandemic, it was about the precautions we were taking or whatever it may be. But even today, it's like, really bringing everything forward. That, there's things on our websites that we've noticed over time that we were kind of missing, and they're sort of simple things. So bringing those things forward. For example, like, we have a lot of business travelers that come in, and we don't necessarily have a landing page that is centered around business travelers, right? So even though some of the amenities that we have are sort of, of course you're going to have those, you want to bring them forward in terms of working space, Wi-Fi, fitness center, those things that will appeal to that customer. So we're kind of thinking about that a little bit differently. But as far as the Airbnbs and, other companies like that, we really position ourselves as like, our sweet spot is 125 rooms. These are smaller, more intimate hotels. When you come for meeting space, there's about 5,000 square feet of space. So it's yours. You're not, amongst like a 25,000 square foot ballroom of multiple different groups that are coming in. So we've really thought of it that way, as like that more intimate gathering. Yeah.
The challenges, if any, about third parties, like the Expedias of the world, and people traveling directly with them, probably losing that data equally as important as losing that consumer experience, right? Can you talk about how you put your brand first and saying book with us directly instead of going through Travelocity and all of those?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and it's a balance, because there's a part of us that like has to lean on the OTAs or those third parties, especially for new hotels who maybe don't have the awareness. But for our more mature hotels, we can kind of shift away. And so we do that by really focusing on what we call our direct booking strategy. So thinking about those channels where we can get first party data, where we can get in front of them, further upstream. And really communicate the benefits of booking direct. That's actually something our team is working on right now. Not that it's a new concept, but why should I book direct with you? There's lots of reasons. Flexible cancellation, better amenities, better, there's certain service things that we can tweak a little bit differently because of the stipulations that are with the third parties, the OTAs. So really trying to bring that to the forefront, but it's a constant battle. It really is. And they're aggressive, for sure.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Doesn't look like any more questions. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, we're going to keep it going. One more, and then we're going to do a networking break. So let's go into the metaverse. We're going to talk about how brands should be thinking about it. How, why, when, where, why not. Marty Berman, AdMix, who is an expert on all things metaverse, is going to share his wisdom with us. Come on up.
Hello, testing. It's going to come out wearing
That was
like an
great, team.
Oculus and stumbling around just to make it a little bit more lighthearted. But I think that's actually a big misperception. And I'll talk a little bit about that today is you don't need to be VR ready to be in the metaverse. But so today I'm going to build a little credibility. It's not a sales pitch. I just want you to know like what I do, what we do, talk a little bit about that. So we help brands, we guide them into the metaverse. And what does that mean? We build for every platform. We own property across 4 different metaverse platforms. As I said, it's a very simple strategy. We own land, we build on it, and then we help execute and activate beyond that from an executional standpoint. And look, so that was it. So that wasn't too bad, was it? But so that's what I literally, my team and I talked to probably 12 to 15 brands a week and their agencies. So I talk to marketers every day in terms of what they're thinking, how they're thinking about the metaverse, what they don't understand. So I do this all the time. So I was very happy to be able to get up here and talk about this. But, you know, I think the first quarter, what we found is that a lot of folks in the industry are really educating themselves. It really, I think the metaverse took everybody by surprise a little bit. And people are trying to catch up and understand what is it? How do I get into it? Why should I get into it? And it's confusing. It's all, you know, it's a new channel, right? And so it takes time to really figure it out. Who are the players? Who should you, you know, be working with and so forth. And so I think that that has, you know, taken a little time to get everybody up to speed. But in the simplest way that I can explain it is that you should think about it because it's a broadly used term, the metaverse. But I think it's very simple if you break it down into 2 different categories, and that's Web 2, which is centralized. So controlled by corporations, creators are relying on those corporations for, you know, revenue share, but yet at any given time, you know, they could change as Meta did recently in terms of the creator revenue share that they want to take, and they really don't have a choice. And, you know, it's more about the corporation. They're dictating the terms, they're setting the rules, and, you know, whenever they want to change it, they have the ability to change it. Versus Web 3, which is decentralized, it's built on the blockchain and really is the infrastructure of everything that's happening within the metaverse. And so it's much more, you know, it's a real economy, has price elasticity. You hear a lot about people buying land in the metaverse. It's a real thing. People are spending millions of dollars on various properties, and it's, you know, it goes up, it's going to go down, but it is a real economy, and you have to think of it that way when you're entering from that perspective, as well as a few other things. But, you know, there's NFTs, but it's all community based, right? So you have Sandbox, Decentraland, Sumnum Space, and then here are really kind of the main platforms. We have over 100 locations across all these different platforms, but as I mentioned, Sandbox, Sumnum Space, Decentraland, those are probably the 3 biggest right now. Decentraland and Sandbox, I would say, are probably the 2 most heavily visited right now. But there's going to be a lot more different platforms growing throughout the metaverse. So it's still very early on in the game. So again, I talk to brands all the time and agencies, and I just wanted to at least share some of the things and learnings that you know, I've come across as we're talking and thinking about how we're going to build for clients. So like defining the metaverse and what is the best entry point. And I kind of, you know, briefly went through some of the different platforms, and it's really important to understand that authenticity is the most important thing in the metaverse, not only for your brand, but also for the community and the, you know, the atmosphere, right? So Decentraland is more realistic graphically. It's still kind of gamified, whereas Sandbox is more like Roblox. It's more blocky, gamey looking. And so you have to decide whether or not that's the right look and feel for your brand to be represented. And then if that's the case, how are you going to do that? And so that we kind of help decide and help guide brands that way. in a sense that, depending on how you want your brand to be represented will determine what sort of metaverse experience you decide to build out. And then in terms of how should I approach the metaverse to activate my brand? So there's a wide spectrum that you can really apply when looking at the metaverse. So the one thing you don't want to do, though, is you don't want to replicate in the real world in the metaverse. You want to be able to, brands are no longer advertising at consumers anymore. They're inviting them in to experience their brand in a new and exciting way. Gives you an opportunity to tell a different narrative, to tell a different story about your brand that you can't in a 30-second commercial or a 60-second commercial or a 7-second commercial or a banner or anything along those lines. And it's the internet in 3D. So it's really about creativity. And you don't have to think so literal about your brand, but how do you communicate some other value about your brand in a fun way, gamifying it a little bit? How do you, what's the other term? I was on a call the other day and it was a consumer brand. They're really kind of struggling how to enter it because of their sort of brand tone about being real. And they thought, well, we'll do something anti-metaverse. I said, well, have you thought about doing a parody of your brand? Like, in the metaverse, like you're in the metaverse, but you're real, but it's, so I think you also have to kind of think about it from that perspective, is sometimes just flip the whole concept on its head and take a different approach to it and have fun. Because, this is an opportunity to test and learn right now. And you don't know what's going to resonate, what's not going to resonate, what's going to work within one specific platform may not work in another. And so you have to be able to figure out this process while it's still small right now. And it's very nascent. There's not more than probably 300,000 monthly users in Decentraland. Sandbox, they go in seasons. They're actually still in alpha. So they go kind of in seasons. I think they've got another season coming up this summer. So that's also another challenge within Sandbox, is that you have to make sure that those seasons are coordinated with, an important time of year that you want to either promote a campaign or a new product launch. And if you don't, well, then you can't participate in Sandbox at that time. So when, I talked about buying land, but as a brand and an agency partner, I think that would be a hard conversation to have with your finance team about how you wanted to convert some of your marketing budget into crypto to buy Ethereum and buy land in the metaverse. I'm sure it'd be a fun conversation, but there are brands that are doing it for those that are a little bit more progressive. I'm a big believer right now that it's all about testing and learning, and that you should lease land right now. But we have flexibility. We do everything in dollars and not in crypto and IOs. But I really, I'm a firm believer in that, because you don't know what's going to be coming down 6 months, a year from now. This might not be the place for you to be for a year or longer. And it's real economies, right? It's price elasticity. We're doing a big project for a Fortune 100 brand right now. And originally through their agency, they came to me, and because we have a good relationship, and they're like, hey, they're considering buying land. Like, why shouldn't they do that? Because that's not what we've talked about. And so I gave them a whole, logical explanation, and we ended up not buying the land, or they ended up not buying the land, and we're doing this big activation. And, from the time that they would have bought it to now, when, prices really depressed within the past week and a half, 2 weeks, the $450,000 that they were going to invest in a parcel of land is now worth maybe less than 100. Now, I can't imagine that conversation when you fought so hard to get in there and convince, finance and legal to buy a piece of land, and then all of a sudden it drops in value so much. And so I think that's one of the considerations you have to think about, where your brand fits in terms of, risk aversion. So you can do lots of things. You could do leasing, like as a renting, you can rent to own, you can just do outright purchase. So there's lots of different ways to enter. It just really is what you have and your legal team has the appetite for. In terms of what are the biggest challenges of the internet of the metaverse, there's quite a few. But one of the things that I think is most important is that you need to understand that it is construction and that it takes time. Even though it's digital, it's not like spinning up a banner or a video commercial, or a commercial quickly for a video, and you can get it next week. And I think that that's a misperception, kind of missed expectations for being able to deliver things. It takes time. You've got to build. These are construction. You have to build things in phases and stages, and it takes time. So approvals, the further out you can start, the better off you're going to be. Because what we're seeing is that brands come in very ambitious and they want to do a lot of things, and then reality, comes in, and well, you can't do that because we're not going to be able to build that on time for when you want to launch it, and suddenly things get pared down a lot. But if you start earlier in the process, you're going to be much better off because you're going to be able to do a lot more things. So when you're considering it, make sure that you give yourself enough of a longer timeline, because essentially what you're doing is not only producing events, but you're also building structures. And so there's a lot of moving parts in something like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is about NFTs that I really want to implore everybody to make sure that they do, is that if you're going to do an NFT for your brand, or in partnership with someone, make sure it has utility value. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it or for PR value, although I know that is sometimes important. But long term, it's not going to be successful, because unless you give people a reason to use that NFT, it just is not going to be much in terms of value and what you want it for. You can use it almost like a loyalty program, because you can communicate with all those NFT holders, but NFTs should be used to give exclusive access to events within the metaverse. So it gets me into special VIP areas, meet and greets, concerts, whatever you want to do, but just get creative with it and use that like that loyalty card to be able to give access. And so that, I think that's one other thing to think about, because a lot of brands have been considering NFTs, and it's great, but you just have to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason and with the right utility value. Finally, the last thing I wanted to point out is that when you're thinking about the metaverse, think about it from an experiential marketing perspective. You've got to give people a reason to keep coming back. So once somebody's been through an experience and there's no reason for them to come back, they're not going to come back. So you have to really kind of plan this out like you would plan out a social media campaign, right? You're not going to post something once a month and then come back the next month and post something. You've got a whole content strategy played out, and you've got that structured out into the future. And that's the same way you need to think of the metaverse, is like, how am I going to keep drawing people in? What can I do to change things up? You can do quests and reward those consumers for coming there with wearables and different unique NFTs. But again, there's got to be utility value in those. So those are some highlights of things that I always like to mention. And that kind of gets into, how do I properly activate our brand in the metaverse? So talking about this, from an experiential standpoint, make sure you give people a reason to come back. And then, is anyone really in the metaverse? And how do I get my customers there? So some of them, Decentraland is actually a browser based. So you can drive people there, and you can also they can click out to social media, to anywhere, a website, anywhere you want to. It's not any VR. Sandbox, a little bit more difficult. You actually have to download Sandbox to play it. So versus Decentraland, which is really easy to jump in as a guest, or if you connect your wallet. Which is also something else that's really important from a customer standpoint. Consumers that don't connect their wallet will not have the same experience in the metaverse that those that have their wallets connected. So you get a much more limited view as a guest than if you have your wallet connected, which gives you the opportunity to buy wearables and participate a little bit more so within the brand experiences. So that's something else to consider. There are currently less than 1 million people that have wallets in the entire metaverse right now, or just in general. So it's still very nascent in terms of the audience. And I think Decentraland, like I think I mentioned this, has about 300,000 monthly users. And so, but it's going to grow. And I think one of the ways it's going to grow and continue to grow as brands come in, they're going to pull their customers in as more events start building and technology changes. But you can use traditional social media. You can use traditional, web-based digital media to drive people there and make people aware. So that's one way to get them there. You can drive them there so many different ways, but also when they're in there, you can reach them to bring them to your activation. So we actually are working right now. We're going to do actually a billboard campaign, if you will, but it's also a portal. So they can actually step through it and then get ported over to the activation that we're doing. So there's different ways that you can approach those, challenges, but I think it really takes a different sort of lens in terms of how you think about it. And billboards, I don't think are the hottest thing by any stretch of the imagination, but they are starting to be utilized in ways just to help create awareness for people that are already into Decentraland. So it's something to consider as part of an activation to help drive those consumers that are already there into your activation. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Any questions? Sure. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I've just got about 45 seconds. So I figured I'd ask.
Is there any real life indicators that determine the pricing of the metaverse, right? The example you just said, somebody lost a third of the value. So like as regular day consumers, is there anything in the real life that says, oh, this would be a good time to buy based on this?
I would say, just it fluctuates much quicker than the real world. I think on a personal level right now, it's a really great opportunity to get in and buy either crypto or land. It's a lot less expensive, but land is still expensive in the metaverse. I mean, you're talking at least 5-6 figures, low 6 figures. So, and you can't get that financed. So, unless you want to spend a couple $100,000 right now, you can buy land. Maybe you can find some for less, but certainly, crypto, I think is a good opportunity right now. It's been very depressed. And then I think it's going to be around for a long time. So, but there's still going to be fluctuations. So do what you feel comfortable. Anyway, another question. Sorry. Or 2 questions.
I'm going first.
This one's going to be tough.
Not really. Ted Rubin. Hey, everybody. Quick question, Marty, because we were just talking about this before, but don't you think the perspective should be not looking at it as an investment? Or there's 2 ways to look at it. Like if you look at it as an investment, then all you care about is what the value of it goes back up and down. So if you're an individual who's buying land on speculation, then it's an investment. If you're a brand, it's more of an investment in your brand, not an investment as in buying a stock and watching how it goes up and down. Or the office building that you just bought to house your people, you're not looking at the value of it every day. It might be calculated for your balance sheet if you're a public company or something. But isn't there a different perspective that you should be looking at it? Because you guys are not really looking at this from an investment point of view. You're looking at this as a branding and marketing point of view, correct?
We look at it both ways. We own land, right? So, and we were actually raising another $10 million just for a land fund, but to buy more property. But I look at it from a brand perspective in a lot of different ways. Yes, it is, and it could be looked at as an investment, but it's an asset on their books and it's in cryptocurrency. So I think right now there's big regulations and concerns and hesitancy from brands to buy for a variety of regulation issues. So that's one thing that I think of is, and then I think it's like, we're doing this on a daily basis. And there's just a tremendous amount of confusion and legal that gets involved in terms of this, which is just, fun, because they're still learning too, right? So, there are brands that want to buy, and if they're thinking about it long-term, hey, that's great. And if they want to do it, I'm not discouraging it. I just think you need to go into it with your eyes open. So, and I just don't think brands have the stomach to be able to see that kind of price fluctuation that often. So that's probably my biggest challenge. One more question.
I know that you talked a little bit about brands. This obviously isn't going to be a fit for everybody. And it has to be a very authentic experience. So can you give an example of a brand that's done it really well?
Yes. Decentraland Fashion Week. I saw a lot of brands that didn't do it well, but there was one brand, it was a skincare brand, it's escaping me right now. It was a nightshade. And, you think to yourself, how can they communicate the value of a nightshade brand in the metaverse, right? They did it so elegantly and simply, it really kind of blew my mind. They had their logo floating over a piece of land, no structure on the land. You actually just dropped in. There's a big hole and you kind of dropped in. It was this very ethereal music and very calming and whatnot. There were some videos. And then if you had your wallet connected, you could actually go to check in, which is usually called a POAP, which is proof of attendance protocol, which is also how people come to your event and experience. And then you got this aura glow around your avatar. And so when you left, then you had, wherever you went, you had this golden like sunshine aura, glow. And I thought, that is brilliant, right? Like, how do you communicate the value of a nighttime skincare cream And I thought they just did it in a really simple but elegant way that didn't beat people over the head with it. So that's my best example. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Marty. It was awesome. Thanks. All right, gang, we're going to take a 30-minute networking break, and we're going to come back with 3 great sessions and have lunch. So everybody stretch your legs, enjoy. Thank you.